Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 1, Life of Ajamil. And this is the translations and commentaries by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And this is text 56. And we've been reading the meeting of the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas, the agents of Yama, Raj, the Lord of Death, and the agents of Lord Vishnu, the agents of eternal spiritual life. So, Ajamil, his fate or destiny is in the balance here. On the one hand, he has committed extremely sinful activities for most of his life. So he, according to Yamaraj and the Yamadutas, he is a candidate for punishment. But he also performed some devotional activities, some spiritual activities, some pious activities. And at the crucial time, at the moment of death, he has called out a name of Lord Narayan. Even though his intention wasn't to seek shelter of God, still he sought shelter of God because the Lord is non-different from his holy names. So, the Yamadutas have been stopped from taking Ajamil to Naraka, the hellish planets. And they're questioning the Vishnudutas why they've been stopped. As far as their understanding goes, from all the Vedic teachings, which are coming directly from Lord Vishnu, that they have jurisdiction over this person. So, this is a continuing conversation here. This is the Yamadutas are continuing to speak. Text 56. In the beginning, this Brahmin named Ajamil studied all the Vedic literatures. He was a reservoir of good character, good conduct, good qualities, firmly established in executing all the Vedic injunctions. He was very mild and gentle. He kept his mind and senses under control. Furthermore, he was always truthful. He knew how to chant the Vedic mantras, and he was also very pure. Ajamil was very respectful to his spiritual master, the fire god, guests, elderly members of his household. Indeed, he was free from false prestige. He was upright, benevolent to all living entities, and well-behaved. He would never speak nonsense or envy anyone. So from these verses here, we see the character of Ajamil was impeccable. He was doing all the right things. He was acting totally within pious life. And if he continued on this path, he was headed for the heavenly planets, the planets of the demigods, to continue like this. He was very pure, so he's way up there in the mode of goodness. Now, Prabhupada's commentary. The order carriers of Yamaraj, the Yamadutas, are explaining the factual position of piety and impiety, and how a living entity is entangled in the material world. Describing the history of Ajamil's life, the Yamadutas relate that in the beginning, he was a learned scholar of Vedic literature, well-behaved, neat, clean, very kind to everyone. In fact, he had all good qualities. In other words, he was like a perfect Brahmin. A Brahmin is expected to be perfectly pious, to follow all regulative principles and have all good qualities. So the symptoms of piety are explained in these verses. Srila Viraragava Acharya comments that Dritavrata means, some Sanskrit here, I'm going to skip it, but Prabhupada says, in other words, Ajamil followed the rules and regulations of celibacy as a perfect brahmachari, was very soft-hearted, truthful, clean, and pure. How he fell down in spite of all these qualities and thus came to be threatened with punishment by Yamaraj will be described in the following verses. So the point is, just living everything perfectly, purely, mode of goodness is not enough to protect one from the possibility of falling down. And we'll see how that happened. And then we'll see the super excellence of devotional service. Text 58 through 60. Once this Brahmin Ajamil, following the order of his father, went to the forest to collect fruit, flower, and 2 kinds of grass, called Samit and Kusha. On the way home, he came upon a Sudra, a very lusty, 4th-class man, who was shamelessly embracing and kissing a prostitute. The Sudra was smiling, singing, and enjoying as if this were proper behavior. Both the Sudra and the prostitute were drunk. The prostitute's eyes were rolling in intoxication. Her dress had become loose. Such was the condition in which Ajamil saw them. We know this happens. This is the kind of thing that happens. This is the illusory energy testing the living entity, what their real desires are. Is there still a trace of some material desire there? And if there is, then become victimized by pursuing it, trying to fulfill it. I think it was Subari Muni, this great yogi, meditating underwater for like thousands of years. You can imagine it, hundreds of years, whatever, some incredibly long time, in meditation to transcend the material situation. And he saw some fishes swimming by that were intimately engaged with each other, and that was it. Let me out of the water. He immediately sought engagement for sex life. So, this is the big problem. The Bhakti Yoga is so practical because in this yoga system there is provision for sex life. Just under rules and regulations and with responsibility, under the direction of the spiritual master, there is provision. Family life, children, husband and wife. So it's so practical. Of course, not everyone will want to build their life around family life. Others may want to build their life of more renunciation, and so there's provision for that also. So there's room for everyone in the Bhakti Yoga system. Prabhupada's commentary, because the goal is to become conscious of Krishna, and it's a very practical science, how to do this, how to purify the senses. Prabhupada's commentary. While traveling along the public way, Ajamil came upon a 4th-class man and a prostitute who are vividly described here. Drunkenness was sometimes manifest even in bygone ages, although not very frequently. In this age of Kali, however, such sin is to be seen everywhere. People all over the world have become shameless. Long ago, when he saw the scene of the drunken Sudra and the prostitute, Ajamil, who was a perfect brahmachari, was affected. Nowadays, such sin is visible in so many places, and we must consider the position of a brahmachari student who sees such behavior. For such a brahmachari to remain steady is very difficult unless he's extremely strong in following regulative principles. Nevertheless, if one takes to Krishna consciousness very seriously, he can withstand the provocation created by sin. Yeah, so Prabhupada's making that point that in Ajamil's time it was very rare. It was present and it was going on, but it was very rare to see intoxicated, illicit behavior out in the open like that. It was very rare. Of course, now it's in every entertainment media there is. It's on the radio, it's in the TV, it's on the billboards. And the people themselves are enacting it, the way they dress, the way they relate to each other in public. It's all very, very sinful, lustful, intermingling with, in the whole business world, the way they sell things is by linking it to illicit sexual behavior. Man and woman kissing on the billboard so they can sell some toothpaste. So, Prabhupada says, very, very difficult. Ajamil, he was a very elevated position, Brahminical. He was situated in Brahminical mode of goodness, very self-controlled, but he became affected. He became affected when he witnessed this. It turned his mind. He started thinking about it, desiring it, to engage like that. So for those devotees who are students, brahmacharis, sannyasis, then it's very difficult for them because it's all around them all the time. So they have to be very strong. Prabhupada says he takes Krishna consciousness seriously, don't have to fall down into this, don't have to be affected by it. You take Krishna consciousness very seriously. And the same goes for household life, because household life isn't a license for all kinds of crazy behavior. It is a very regulated situation, and it is an ashram, spiritual ashram, for developing Krishna consciousness. So in this age it's very difficult because of the atmosphere is so contaminated, and that's why Lord Chaitanya has put all of his personal potency into the chanting of the holy names. It's something special going on here. Lord Chaitanya's personal appearance to inaugurate the chanting of the holy names. So this movement has full mercy of the Lord. It's empowered with the full mercy of Lord Chaitanya, it's Krishna himself. So in our Krishna consciousness movement, we prohibit illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. In Kali Yuga, a drunk, half-naked woman embracing a drunk man is a very common sight, especially in Western countries. Restraining oneself after seeing such things is very difficult. Nevertheless, if by the grace of Krishna one adheres to regulative principles, chants Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna will certainly protect him. Indeed, Krishna says his devotee is never vanquished. Kantaya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Therefore, all the disciples practicing Krishna consciousness should obediently follow the regulative principles, remain fixed in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Then there will be no fear. Otherwise, one's position is very dangerous, especially in the Kali Yuga. So, even if there is some slip-up, abhichet siddharacharo bhajate mama nanyabhak, they become very soon reinstated on the devotional path, devotional service. We're practicing. If someone was perfect right away, then there would be no need to practice. But practicing means like a child learning to walk. Sometimes the child is going to stumble just a little bit. But because the walking propensity is there, the nature of the soul, The propensity is to serve God because we're spirit and God is spirit. We're not matter. We're not these material bodies. So even if there is some lapse, detour, distraction, then we can take it up again. So we know the door's not closed, slammed shut behind, but it is very dangerous. It is very dangerous because you become swept away by the material energy. It's very hard to, when these desires begin to develop in the heart, they block out the desires to serve Krishna. It becomes blocked. And the mind and the senses begin to control the living entity rather than the living entity controlling the mind and the senses. So when the horses run away wild, like the senses, they start to run away wild. It's a runaway wagon, very difficult to bring it back under control. So understanding this, then we can be very, very careful in what we expose ourselves to, what we see, what we look at, who we associate with. We should know that we do become affected by these things. We take on the qualities of who we associate with, and that goes for entertainment, if we're looking at some entertainment, or people who are attached to this kind of life. We hear from them, or we associate with them. We have to be very careful not to do those things. But if it happens and we see that we're becoming a little infected, we have to immediately take shelter of the holy name, immediately pray for the mercy of the Lord, that the mind does not start to become controlled by the senses, but rather the mind becomes the friend and the mind controls the senses. The mind pulls, intelligence is like the driver. He pulls the reins in so the wild horses don't drag over the cliff. So Ajamil, we're going to see, wasn't able to do that. He got pulled away. Desire sprung up in his heart, and he was off to the races. Text 61. The Sudra, his arm decorated with turmeric powder, was embracing the prostitute. When Ajamil saw her, dormant lusty desires in his heart awakened, and in illusion he fell under their control. So just being situated in the mode of goodness and doing everything so nicely, perfect this way and that way, perfect behavior, what is in the heart? There are dormant lusty desires. They come from previous lives also. And they are reawakened. They can be reawakened. That's why by engaging in devotional service, those dormant lusty desires are completely uprooted and pulled out and gone forever, never to come back. One who goes to my supreme abode never returns to this material world, Arjuna. So Ajamil, externally, he was doing everything right, which is good. He wanted to do everything right. But internally, there was some dormant lusty desires in his heart that just performing externally was not addressing that issue. And when he came in contact with this man and woman behaving like this in a lusty behavior with each other, then it woke up in his own heart. He said, oh, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Oh, yeah, that's why I came to the material world. I wanted that. Yeah, now, oh, yeah, the hell with everything else. That's what I want. So they become overcome. Prabhupada's commentary, it is said that if one's body is smeared with turmeric, it attracts lusty desires of the opposite sex. The word kamaliptena indicates the Sudra was decorated with turmeric smeared on his body. Turmeric. Turmeric has a lot of medicinal value, and it's a very nice spice for making offerings, cooked offerings to Krishna. And now we see if it has other uses too, aphrodisiac type use. All right, turmeric. All right, text 62. As far as possible, he patiently tried to remember the instructions of the Shastras, not even to see a woman. With the help of this knowledge and his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires, but because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. So he was remembering the instructions, he'd studied all the Vedic scriptures, and he had a spiritual master, and with the knowledge and intellect, he was trying to control his lusty desires. His intelligence was at work, but because of the force of Cupid within his heart, because of the desire, there was a lusty material desire in his heart, he was unable to control his mind. This Krishna says to Arjuna, when Arjuna asked, by what is it that one is impelled to act as if even against his will? What is that? And Krishna said, it's lust and lust only. So this lust can be uprooted and purified by becoming attached to Krishna. This is the science of Bhakti Yoga. How to turn that lust around and purify it into, instead of attachment for sense enjoyment, attachment for serving Krishna. Which means hearing and chanting about Krishna, remembering Krishna, offering prayers to Krishna, glorifying Krishna, worshipping Krishna, serving Krishna with in the temple in the deity forms, or serving the lotus feet of Krishna, his transcendental preaching movement, and serving the pure devotees of Krishna, because they're the ones that actually guide and direct the lusty living entities on the path of purification in relationship to Krishna. So this is the big one, that even people who are very advanced in yoga, Sabari Muni, different advanced in yoga, Ajamil, very advanced in Brahminical practice, it's not enough. Advanced in mental speculation, great liberated souls who know the difference between spirit and matter, it's not enough. Because within the heart, this lusty desire is a force of Cupid within the heart. And until that is redirected toward loving service to the Supreme Lord, then it will trump all the other efforts. That's Maya's ace in the hole, is this lusty desire within the heart. Whatever practices one does, until that is addressed, until that is pulled out, you're still vulnerable, falling down, and that's what happened to Ajamil. Unless one is very, Prabhupada's commentary, unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, proper bodily, mental, intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. Thus, after seeing a man embracing a young woman and practically doing everything required for sex life, even a fully qualified Brahmin, as described above, could not control his lusty desires and restrain himself from pursuing them. Because of the force of materialistic life, to maintain self-control is extremely difficult unless one is specifically under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service. And then, such a person who is under the protection of the Supreme Personality through devotional service, they are inoculated against these kinds of infections because they're engaged in devotional service. No room for this other stuff. It's not attractive. And the pure devotee, engaged in pure devotional service, is not attracted at all. You just don't even, it's not even a consideration. It's like stool. Material sense gratification is about as attractive as a pile of stool. So, But on the way, on the path, those that are struggling with these things, in a very difficult situation, and we see from Ajamil's history, he didn't pass the test. He gave in. 63. In the same way that the sun and moon are eclipsed by a low planet, the Brahmin lost all his good sense. Yes, the sun and moon, as powerful as they are, Krishna and devotional service, as powerful as they are, we see here, just like a low planet can eclipse the sun and the moon, can get in the way of someone who's practicing devotional service, trying to prepare to go back home, back to Godhead. This can become eclipsed, just like a low planet gets in front of the sun and the moon. And because this happened, that's why eclipses are so inauspicious. I would think that would be why. It's not recommended to look at an eclipse of the sun and the moon. It's very inauspicious. Would have to say that this was the reason, because a low planet is blocking the power and the light and the energy and being able to perceive the higher planet. So it's inauspicious. That's why you're not to look at eclipses. So the Brahmin lost all his good sense because his higher goal was eclipsed now by a lower goal. Verse continued, taking advantage of the situation, he always thought of the prostitute, and within a short time he took her as a servant in his house and abandoned all the regulative principles of a Brahmin. Yeah, okay. He wanted to taste this lower taste. Wanted to taste this. So he gave up his Brahminical practice and he became like an animal. Prabhupada's commentary. By speaking this verse, Sukadeva Goswami wants to impress upon the mind of the reader that Ajamil's exalted position as a Brahmin was vanquished by his association with the prostitute, so much so that he forgot all his Brahminical activities. So all his external practices were completely eclipsed by this association with the prostitute. So just like the sun and the moon are eclipsed by a lower planet, all his Brahminical practices were blocked out now, and he was with this lower activity. Nevertheless, at the end of his life, by chanting the 4 syllables of the name Narayana, he was saved from the greatest danger of falling down. Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahatovayat. Even a little devotional service can save one from the greatest danger. Devotional service, which begins with chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is so powerful that even if one falls down from the exalted position of a Brahmin through sexual indulgence, he can be saved from all calamities if he somehow or other chants the holy name of the Lord. This is the extraordinary power of the Lord's holy name. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, it's advised that one not forget the chanting of the holy name, even for a moment. Satatam kitayanto mam yatatantas chavrit tridhavrata. There are so many dangers in this material world that one may fall down from an exalted position at any time. Yet, if one keeps himself always pure and steady by chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, he'll be safe, without a doubt. This is the super excellence of the holy name of the Lord. The external facilities may be there or they may not be there. The exalted position may come and go. But the chanting of the holy name can be done anywhere, anytime, and should be done everywhere, all the time. We'll see that's simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, Narayana, even though everything else in his life fell apart, it was all unacceptable, that was acceptable. How powerful that is. What a great reassurance, too. Text 64. Thus, Ajamil began spending whatever money he had inherited from his father to satisfy the prostitute with various material presentations so that she would remain pleased with him. He gave up all his Brahminical activities to satisfy the prostitute. What a foolish man, huh? He's so foolish. That's so silly. Foolish, foolish man. Huh. Prabhupada's commentary. There are many instances throughout the world in which even a purified person, being attracted by a prostitute, spends all the money he has inherited. Prostitute hunting is so abominable that the desire for sex with a prostitute can ruin one's character, destroy one's exalted position, and plunder all one's money. Therefore, illicit sex is strictly prohibited. One should be satisfied with a married wife, and for even a slight deviation will create havoc. A Krishna-conscious grihastha should always remember this. He should always be satisfied with one wife, be peaceful simply by chanting Hare Krishna mantra. Otherwise, at any moment he may fall down from good position, as exemplified in the case of Ajamil. So, the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. In Krishna's planet, this illicit behavior is praised by all the realized souls, by all the great saints and acharyas. Krishna's Rasa Leela with the gopis is considered the highest form of love of Godhead. But it's not at all material. It has nothing to do with material body at all, or mind. It is completely on the spiritual platform, the spiritual world. This is a spiritual activity of the Lord. And when it is reflected down through the material elements, through material desire, then it becomes the lowest, most abominable. It's a perverted reflection, like the tree is standing like this on the shore of the lake, but in the water in the lake, it's like this, upside down. So the material world is material energy has a reflective nature to it. It's reflective, so it reflects. Material energy reflects the absolute truth, but it's perverted reflection. So a man may have one wife, or a woman may have one husband. It goes the same way, but here the way the wording is they're talking about, like the man, if he looks for a paramour lover outside of marriage. Now, the desire is very strong. Why? It may be very strong. Why? Because spiritually, in the highest, topmost rasa with Krishna, that's the nature of it. But to imitate that means falling down into lower and lower species of life. It means degradation. It is absolutely essential to engage on the devotional service, a platform of devotional service, and begin to cultivate a relationship with Krishna through loving devotional service. So one offers me a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water. With love and devotion, I will accept. So this is the science of bhakti yoga, is to practice devotional service to the Lord, to develop that love and devotion under the guidance of the pure devotee and the spiritual master and those that are sincerely following the spiritual masters. So the relationship that everyone's looking for is with Krishna. That's the relationship, whether one is a renunciate or is in family life. The fulfillment of the loving propensity is with Krishna. So if someone is in household life and they're restless, and they think that they can find some fulfillment and happiness outside of the married life, it's an illusion, because what they're really looking for is Krishna, relationship with Krishna. So then it becomes more and more entangled. You get further and further away from Krishna, and less happy and satisfied, and more entangled in material activities. Text 65. So Prabhupada says, if it's too strong to remain renounced, then yes, go ahead. Make a life together, husband and wife. But know that your relationship is with Krishna, and you can help each other like that. Text 65. Because his intelligence was pierced by the lustful glance of the prostitute, the victimized Brahmin Ajamil engaged in sinful acts in her association. He even gave up the company of his very beautiful young wife, who came from a very respectable Brahmin family. Oh my goodness, he was married yet. He said he was a brahmachari, he practiced as a brahmachari, but now we find out that actually he also was in grihastha life. He had a very beautiful young wife. So he gave up everything, which means he also gave up his position in society, which means how do you earn a livelihood if you don't have any position in the social structure? You're an outcast. And he's also not trustworthy because he's doing all these things. No one can trust him. He's not trust. So how do you earn a living? See? Wow. He just really went all the way down. I mean, Prabhupada's commentary. Customarily, everyone is eligible to inherit his father's property. And Ajamil also inherited the money of his father. But what did he do with the money? Instead of engaging the money in the service of Krishna, he engaged it in the service of a prostitute. Therefore, he was condemned and was punishable by Yamaraj. How did this happen? He was victimized by the dangerous, lustful glance of a prostitute. Okay, so at this point he does have money. He inherited his father's property, and now he is squandering it, throwing it at this prostitute to try to delight her. He's serving her. He's engaged in the service of the prostitute. So, the prostitute is Maya. So this is why he's condemned and punishable by Yamaraj. Prabhupada says, how did this happen? It was by the lustful glance of a prostitute. Piercing glance. Something about looking into her eyes and having her look back into his eyes, it affected his heart. There was something communicated there in these lustful glances. So, conditioned souls love to look at each other. They like to look at each other's faces. What do they see? They don't see the soul. They just like to look at each other's faces. So, he was victimized by a dangerous, lustful glance of a prostitute. Text 66. Although born of a Brahmin family, this rascal, bereft of intelligence because of the prostitute's association, earned money somehow or other, regardless of whether properly or improperly, and used it to maintain the prostitute's sons and daughters. '67. This Brahmin irresponsibly spent his long lifetime transgressing all the rules and regulations of the Holy Scripture, living extravagantly, eating food prepared by a prostitute. Therefore, he's full of sins. He's unclean and is addicted to forbidden activities. So this is the Yamadutas giving account of what happened to Ajamil. he was eating food, prepared unclean food, and he was going against all the rules and regulations of Scripture, and he's addicted to forbidden activities. He's like this hopeless case. He's hopeless. Prabhupada's commentary: food prepared by an unclean, sinful man or woman, especially a prostitute, is extremely infectious. Jamil ate such food, therefore he was subjected to be punished by Yamaraj. Text 68. This man, Jamil, did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him into the presence of Yamaraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he'll be punished and purified. So this punishing is purifying. It's purifying. See, you did this wrong, and this is what you get. Smack, smack, smack. So, purification. Prabhupada's commentary: the Vishnudutas had forbidden the Yamadutas to take a Jamil to Yamaraj, and therefore the Yamadutas explained that taking such a man to Yamaraj was appropriate. Since Jamil had not undergone atonement for his sinful acts, he was to be taken to Yamaraj to be purified. Okay, so what to speak of devotional service? Jamil had not even undergone any atonement for all his sinful acts. He was just doing sinful things. Who cares about atonement? So he had to be apprehended like that and get some punishment so he could get purified. When a man commits murder, he becomes sinful. Therefore, he must also be killed. Otherwise, after death, he must suffer many sinful reactions. Similarly, punishment by Yamaraj is a process of purification for the most abominable sinful persons. Therefore, the Yamadutas requested the Vishnudutas not to obstruct their taking a Jamil to Yamaraj. So here, Prabhupada upholds capital punishment, that when someone commits murder, he must also be killed. So, if it is indeed a fact, and there's no doubt about it, that the person has murdered another person, then their punishment is they must be murdered also. They must be killed. Otherwise, they have to suffer so many sinful reactions. That's their atonement, is to give their life has to be taken. And then they can start over again. Otherwise, they have to go through so much punishments in the hellish planets. So with one fell swoop, the atonement is there for having murdered someone, is you must be killed. And then it's wiped clean. Can begin again. Otherwise, so much punishment has to take place in the Naraka. So, in this day and age, this is the actual, what must actually happen according to the Vedas and Krishna's arrangement for the smooth running of material world and the dealing with the sinful living entities. However, if the system of justice system is contaminated, then it's hard to implement this properly, because many innocent people may be abused like this for political reasons, so on and so forth. So it's very difficult to establish this in the Kali Yuga at the present time. But this is the way it works. So much unnecessary suffering going on in the material world during the Kali Yuga. We can go on to the next chapter. That's the end of chapter 1. And chapter 2 is a Jamil delivered by the Vishnudutas. So, chapter 1, we heard a lot from the Yamadutas, why they should take Ajamil to Yamaraj. Now we're going to hear from the Vishnudutas, and there is why he doesn't go to Yamaraj. This is the little summary in the beginning of the chapter. In this chapter, the messengers from Vaikuntha explained to the Yamadutas the glories of chanting the holy name of the Lord. The Vishnudutas said, now impious acts are being performed, even in assembly of devotees, for a person who is not punishable is going to be punished in the assembly of Yamaraj. The mass of people are helpless and must depend upon the government for their safety and security. But if the government takes advantage of this to harm the citizens, where will they go? We see perfectly that Ajamil should not be punished, although they are attempting to take him to Yamaraj for punishment. So this is the summary, they're pretty firm about that. It was due to Ajamil's glorifying the holy name of the Supreme Lord that he was not punishable. The Vishnudutas explained this as follows. Simply by once chanting the holy name of Narayana, this Brahmin had become free from the reactions of sinful life. Indeed, he's been freed not only from sins of this life, but from sins of many, many thousands of other lives. He's already undergone true atonement for all his sinful actions. If one atones according to the directions of the Shastras, one does not actually become free from sinful reactions. But if one chants the holy name of the Lord, even a glimpse of such chanting can immediately free one from all sins. Chanting the glories of the Lord's holy name awakens all good fortune. Therefore, there's no doubt that Ajamil, being completely free from all sinful reactions, should not be punished by Yamaraj. And this conversation, Ajamil is witnessing this conversation back and forth. He's hearing both sides. He's hearing it all. So, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, he's in a very good position to continue on in devotional life, and go back home. So his sinful life has been stopped, and he's hearing this conversation. It was due to Ajamil's glorifying the holy name of the Supreme Lord that he was not punishable. So, the next paragraph. As they were saying this, the Vishnudutas released Ajamil from the ropes of the Yamadutas and left for their own abode. The Brahmin Ajamil, however, offered his respectful obeisances to the Vishnudutas. He could understand how fortunate he was to have chanted the holy name of Narayan at the end of his life. Indeed, he could realize the full significance of this good fortune. Having thoroughly understood the discussion between the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas, he became a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He lamented very much for how very sinful he had been, and he condemned himself again and again. Finally, because of his association with the Vishnudutas, Ajamil, his original consciousness aroused, gave up everything, went to Hardwar, where he engaged in devotional service without deviation, always thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus the Vishnudutas went there, seated him on a golden throne, and took him away to Vaikuntha. In summary, although the sinful Ajamil meant to call his son the holy name of Lord Narayana, even though chanted in the preliminary stage, Namabhas, was able to give him liberation. Therefore, one who chants the holy name of the Lord with faith and devotion is certainly exalted. He's protected even in this material, conditional life. Oh my goodness. Hey, well, the Yamadutas went on and on and on with different arguments and explanations and so many things. And the Vishnudutas just said, he chanted the holy name of the Lord, that's all there is to it, took the ropes off of him. And by their association, Ajamil became purified, he actually became a pure devotee. Because that's how it works, by the association of pure devotees. He had the association of the residents of Vaikuntha. Text 1. Sukadeva Goswami said, "My dear king, the servants of Lord Vishnu are always very expert in logic and arguments. After hearing the statements of the Yamadutas, they replied as follows." The Vishnudutas said, "Alas, how painful it is that irreligion is being introduced to an assembly where religion should be maintained. Indeed, those in charge of maintaining the religious principles are needlessly punishing a sinless, unpunishable person." So they were introducing the highest principle of religion, which is sarvadhaman parityajya mamikam saranam braja. Just abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender to me. That's the highest religion. And by Ajamil calling out the name of the Lord, even though it was Namabhas, that is the highest form of religion, is to glorify the Lord, call on the Lord, chant the Lord's holy names. Prabhupada's commentary. The Vishnudutas accused the Yamadutas of violating the religious principles by attempting to drag Ajamil to Yamaraj for punishment. Yamaraj is the officer appointed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to judge religious and irreligious principles and to punish people who are irreligious. However, if completely sinless people are punished, the entire assembly of Yamaraj is contaminated. This principle applies not only in the assembly of Yamaraj, but throughout human society also. Yes, and that is the problem with trying to establish the capital punishment, where a murderer has his life taken to help him atone, help that soul become free from the reactions of that, because the entire assembly of human society is contaminated. So the Vishnudutas are saying, well, this is contaminating the whole assembly that's meant to determine what's religious and what's irreligious. That's what this assembly is all about. That's what Yamaraj is all about, to separate the irreligious from the religious. And you're taking a sinless person and you're prepared to punish him. The whole thing is contaminated. Prabhupada continues, in human society, properly maintaining religious principles is the duty of the king's court or the government. Read that again. In human society, properly maintaining religious principles is the duty of the king's court or the government. Unfortunately, in the Kali Yuga, the religious principles are tampered with. The government cannot properly judge who is to be punished and who is not. It is said that in Kali Yuga, if one cannot spend money in court, one cannot get justice. Indeed, in courts of justice, it is often found magistrates are bribed for favorable judgments. Sometimes religious men who preach the Krishna consciousness movement for the benefit of the entire populace are arrested and harassed by the police and courts. The Vishnudutas, who are Vaishnavas, lamented for these very regrettable facts. Because of their spiritual compassion for the fallen souls, Vaishnavas go out to preach according to the standard method of all religious principles. But, unfortunately, because of the influence of Kali Yuga, Vaishnavas who have dedicated their lives to preaching the glories of the Lord are sometimes harassed and punished by courts on false charges of disturbing the peace. So, this is the highest court. Yamaraj's court is the highest court in the material world. It's the highest court for the government to determine religious from irreligious. But we see in the way we live, whatever country or society we live, there's a system for judging what is just and right and what is offensive and wrong. And because in the Kali Yuga everything is contaminated, the lines of religious principles, basic religious principles, are very blurred. And the bribery for the government officials and in the courts makes performing this function, which is the duty of the government, is now corrupted and is not being executed properly. So the Vishnu Dutas were saying, is this now happening in Yamaraj's court? Is this now going to happen? You're going to contaminate like this? Text 3. A king or government official should be so well qualified that he acts as a father, maintainer, and protector of the citizens because of affection and love. He should give the citizens good advice and instructions according to standard scriptures and should be equal to everyone. Yamaraj does this, for he is the supreme master of justice, and so do those who follow in his footsteps. However, if such persons become polluted and exhibit partiality by punishing an innocent, blameless person, where will the citizens go to take shelter for their maintenance and security? So we see that this is very, very prominent throughout all the countries of the world, that this is going on. And where are those leaders who actually have love and affection for the citizens, give them good advice according to standard scriptures, and are equal to everyone? Where is that benevolent leader? Where is that benevolent government? Where are they? So, this is the way the actual government is to be conducted, and we see from the histories of Vyāsadeva, his leadership, and the other different great kings and leaders in the past, Prithu Maharaj, Pariksit Maharaj. They had this quality of benevolent leadership, and everything would run very smoothly within the society, within the culture. Saintly kings. So, Prabhupada's commentary. Oh no, we read that. Yes, Prabhupada's commentary. The king, or in modern times the government, should act as the guardian of the citizens by teaching them the proper goal of life. The human form of life is especially meant for realization of oneself, one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because this cannot be realized in animal life. The duty of the government, therefore, is to take charge of training all the citizens in such a way that by a gradual process they will be elevated to the spiritual platform and will realize the self and relationship with God. This principle was followed by kings like Maharaj Yudhisthira, Maharaj Pariksit, Lord Ramachandra, Maharaj Ambarish, Prahlad Maharaj. The leaders of the government must be very honest and religious, because otherwise all the affairs of the state will suffer. Unfortunately, in the name of democracy, rogues and thieves are electing other rogues and thieves to the most important posts in government. Recently, this has been proven in America, where the president had to be condemned and dragged down from his post by the citizens. This is only one case, but there are many others. Because of the importance of Krishna consciousness movement, people should be Krishna conscious and should not vote for anyone who is not Krishna conscious. Then there will be actual peace and prosperity in the state. When a Vaishnava sees mismanagement in the government, he feels great compassion in his heart and tries his best to purify the situation by spreading the Hare Krishna movement. So in this age, it's not the king, it's elected officials. And the solution for having good Krishna conscious government in that kind of a structure is to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. So the citizens will vote for proper leaders. So it's very important to spread the Krishna consciousness movement so that when the voting takes place, they will vote for proper candidate. They'll be able to recognize who is actually a good leader, the Krishna conscious principles.